Over the weekend, I was just going through the different streaming services, and I was checking out Paramount Plus, and a show really captivated my interest because it was hosted by Geddy Lee of Rush. And I'm a big Rush fan, and my regret is that I did not see them in concert. That is one thing I wish I could have had the opportunity to, and it just never happened. But I really loved all the songs that were performed by Rush. And so Geddy Lee talked to 4 different bassists of different groups. And so let me share with you what this show is and why I really enjoyed it. The show is called Geddy Lee Asks, Are Bass Players Human Too? And there's only 4 episodes. The first episode, he is hanging out with Les Claypool, who's the bassist for Primus. The second episode, he is chatting with Robert Trujillo, who is the current bassist for Metallica. The third bassist is a female, and she's also a fellow Canadian like Geddy Lee, and her name is Melissa O'Dormar, who was the bassist for Hole, as well as for the bassist for Smashing Pumpkins. And then the fourth episode was with bassist of Nirvana, Chris Novoselic. Now, what I really liked about it is that Geddy Lee was just chit-chatting with them, and it was very interesting how they came to play the bass, why they wanted to play the bass, what kind of activities are they currently involved with, and are there any side projects that they were doing. So I wanted to share a couple of clips of that. But before I do that, let me share with you his intro of each episode.
I'm Geddy Lee, bass player in the band Rush for almost 5 decades, but also a bird photographer, wine collector, baseball aficionado, a nerd. Which got me wondering whether my fellow bass folk are more than just the shadowy figures we see skulking around the stage. I want to know, are bass players human too?
And so this show, I think, was really good. And if you're a fan of Rush, I'd highly recommend that you watch it. If you have Paramount Plus, which I do. If you're a musician, I highly recommend that you watch this, because Geddy Lee, they do share some common interests. There might be some that are different, but it also shows that it's one thing that they all have a style to each their own. And it was great. I really liked it. Let me share with you what inspired these other musicians to play bass.
Why bass?
It's funny because when I was a kid, I wanted to play some form of instrument. And there was a talent show at the junior high, and there was these 2 guys playing guitar through these tiny little Fender champs, and it's all... And I just remember looking and going, that's the instrument, the electric instrument I do not want to play, because it sounds absolutely horrible. Flash forward to high school, all these bands needed bass players because nobody wanted to play bass. Everybody wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. Nobody wanted to play bass. And I was like, well, I'll play bass. I was instantly in a band, didn't even know how to play it. And I'd play along with Rush, All the World's a Stage. But I didn't know, I couldn't hear the notes. So I would just be playing rhythmically along with you guys, not knowing if I was even in the right place. But that was a big part of how I got started.
Rob's wild Spanish-style home is really something to see.
We're actually going to go through the kitchen.
How did this rocker land in such a magical place? Rob grew up a few miles away in Santa Monica. As a kid, he was an avid skateboarder and surfer, and he still is. In the 80s, you may have seen him in the crossover thrash band Suicidal Tendencies.
Mr. Robert Trujillo!
And he spent much of the 90s playing bass with Ozzy. But in the early 2000s, he landed metal's most coveted gig.
We want you to be a real member of this band, not just a hired man.
How would you describe the bass and its role in a band?
My first honor as a bass player is I won Bass Player of the Year for the Gibson Guitar Awards in the late 90s. In the car on the way, I wrote down the bass is the mother of all instruments, and that she is the one you can't live without, but you sometimes don't notice is there. And it's the glue that's actually the one that's moving you and you're feeling the most. There is a bit of a peacekeeping component that is sweet and sensitive to others. I ended up having a weird destiny in music where I kept on being the replacement bass player. Granted, in whole, I definitely was an integral part of the sound and the chemistry of the music.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Smashing Pumpkins, the rules were stated, no mistakes, no days off, and you can't get sick. And I obliged.
Rush you can play Rush on accordion, yeah. I've proved it. Yeah, it's a fact.
Did you go to guitar and then bass guitar? How did that happen?
Yeah, I started guitar, and then I met Kurt Cobain, and he had a guitar and an amp, and then I just borrowed this bass amp and a bass and started playing bass, and I really got into playing bass.
So your bass playing had to accommodate, where he went on the guitar.
Which was pretty easy. I mean, those were great riffs. I had these great riffs to work with. The bass player follows the kick drum as the boss, that bump, bump, bump. You stay with that, and then you have the job of doing the melody and filling in spaces and
smoothing out the rhythm.
And there was other things that they talked about, the things that they currently like to do right now. So this was just, I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed Geddy Lee talking to these different bassists. Now, I'm not a fan of a couple of the groups, but at the same time, these guys were just very down to earth. They were great, and it's like I said, if you're a music fan, I highly recommend that if you have Paramount Plus, to go watch this show, check it out. What's nice about each episode is that it's not super long. They're about 20 to 30 minutes, I would say. So like I said, it gives you, if you have a couple hours to kill, you'll definitely be able to watch all 4 episodes within that 2-hour time slot. So, like I said, go check it out.